Welcome back to the Foreign Desk Power Panel tonight. I am Lisa Daftari. We have a very, very special program for you tonight. I'm extremely excited. We have the dream team of foreign policy experts to discuss one topic and one topic only. It is a big topic, and hopefully we can get through it all. It's the Cyrus Accords, the potential normalizing of relations between Israel and Iran. And to break this all down for us, we have the co-authors of the Cyrus Accords, Victoria Coates and Len Khodorkovsky. Victoria Coates is the senior fellow for the Center for Security Policy and former senior policy advisor to the Secretary of Energy, deputy national security advisor for the Middle East and North Africa under President Trump. Before that, national security advisor for Senator Ted Cruz. And of course, what many may not know about Victoria is that she actually has a PhD in art history from the University of Pennsylvania and is author of David Sling, A History of Democracy in 10 Works of Art. Welcome to the show, Victoria. I would also like to welcome Len, who is served as the State Department as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Global Public Affairs. He was also a senior advisor to U.S. Special Representative for Iran, the Chief Marketing Officer for America's Economic Diplomacy. Prior to joining government, he has a very interesting background. He was in advertising for more than 20 years, where he helped Fortune 100 companies develop their ads and grow their brands. And of course, we have back with us again tonight, Mr. Bijan Kian, President of the Institute for Voices of Liberty, twice confirmed by Senate, served for 3 consecutive administrations, and most recently served as deputy lead on the landing team for the Office of Director of National Intelligence for President Trump, and the recipient of the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. He writes, speaks, thinks on all things global economy and foreign policy. Welcome to you all.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Wonderful to be with the architects of the Cyrus Accords,
absolutely.
Len and Victoria, 2 dear friends.
Absolutely. And not only that, each one of you has such a unique background, and yet you are such incredible advocates, champions of this cause with your backgrounds in foreign policy. Victoria and Len, you first authored an op-ed in the Jerusalem Post introducing this initiative, which is the Cyrus Accords. And if I can briefly just say, it's similar to the Abraham Accords, but we want to hear more. So we covered this at the Foreign Desk. The article did tremendously well. We're seeing the hashtag appear on social media, Cyrus Accords, Cyrus Accords. People want to know what this is. And Len, I'm going to turn to you, because the best way to communicate something is to do it once and do it right. And since you were in advertising, give us your 30-second elevator pitch on the Cyrus Accords. What are they?
Well, thanks, Lisa. No pressure, of course. I actually think this is an easy one because it's intuitive. What we have happening in Iran over the last 42 years is a historic anomaly. The Islamic regime that has been lording over the Iranian people is not consistent with the long history of Persia and Iran going back to the days of Cyrus the Great. And of course, Cyrus the Great is a great Persian leader that is known for his tolerance, openness, and an advocate of freedom. And so, what better way to follow Abraham Accords, the peace deal between Israel and its Arab neighbors, than with Cyrus Accords, an agreement that's named after someone who advocated peace and tolerance between the Persian people and the Jewish people. And so it makes total sense that history would repeat itself, as it always does, and the people of Israel and the people of Iran will once again live in peace and cooperation, collaboration, as they did for so many eons.
Wonderful. And Victoria, you and Len, you came up with this. What were you having a cup of coffee, socially distancing, of course, and let's just save Iran's future? How did you come up with this idea?
Well, I would just say this is a dialogue with Len that's been going on for a number of years now, as we have been trying to resolve the just terrible tensions with Iran. And I would say today we're seeing evidence of the destructive behavior that the Iranian regime is playing with the attack on Erbil. We can get into that later, but I think with the Cyrus Accords, what Len and I are proposing, as Len says, is we're going back to the historic accords between the Iranian and Jewish people, but we can start to put meat on the bones. What does this look like? What are the, say, high tech? What are the financial? What are the people-to-people connections that can be created through the Cyrus Accords that will make the lives of the Iranian people better very, very quickly? This can happen in real time, and it's going to be, I think, the most beneficial thing that will help Iran and the Iranian people in particular come out of the pandemic in a positive way. Right now, there's very little hope. This actually gives them some hope.
Right. I don't think anyone would disagree with you. But Bijan, I want to turn to you. I think a lot of people, when they hear Iran and Israel, they think oil and water. I mean, how can that even be? Whether they think back to 40 some odd years ago when the Shah of Iran had a wonderful relationship with Israel, or to 1500 years ago, and we're talking about Cyrus the Great. There was a very natural relationship, friendship between the Jewish people and the Iranian people. Can you speak to that?
Sure. It's 2,559 years ago when the Cyrus cylinder was created, according to history. And, I have to add, first of all, congratulations and thank you to my friends, Victoria Coates and Len Khodorkovsky, for sitting down for 3 years and talking about ideas that would really, it's going to be a historical event, and it's already started. I believe it's already started. I talked to people inside Iran through Twitter and other social media. They're embracing the idea. They already know about it. They're celebrating, and they're ready to go to work on it. So, I think the name Cyrus Accords says it all. You gave Len 30 seconds to describe it.
That wasn't fair, right? That wasn't fair.
He could just say, hey, what can I say? Cyrus Accords. It speaks to what is the essence of the name Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great in 539 BC apparently wrote what is inscribed on the Cyrus cylinder, which is now known as the first Declaration of Human Rights, a symbol of tolerance and freedom. So it's a natural. Cyrus encouraged the Jews to go back to their homelands after the temple was destructed not once but twice, and gave funds from the Persian Empire treasury to rebuild the temple. So in that sense, I believe it's not too difficult to say Cyrus the Great is the first world leader who promoted Zionism, and is the first world leader who could be recognized as the first Zionist in that sense. So it's a natural thing. This is not something that one has to think very deeply about. And Victoria is right. People to people is a natural evolution to happen. It is happening. Mm-hmm. So this is not a perspective on the future. It's happening. As soon as the article hit, people embraced it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if we want to draw the parallel between the Abraham Accords, I think everyone here was privy to what was going on behind the scenes in the lead up to the Abraham Accords. I remember going to the White House quite a few times, meeting with a small group of people and Jared Kushner. And on the first round, there was a peace offer, an economic offer that was presented to the Palestinians, which was, of course, dead on arrival. That was taken to Bahrain. And what did the Jared Kushner team discover there was that the Palestinians may not be ready, but these moderate Arab nations are, and with that, we're going to push forward. And it's to credit the Trump administration, Jared Kushner, Avi Berkowitz, and President Trump himself, of course, for being that innovative and pushing it forward. like the two of you, with this wonderful idea, but it's also timing that the people were ready. Victoria, um, what indication do we have, or what pieces need to move into place in order for these Cyrus Accords to take place? What do we need to see from the Biden administration, and how could we get there?
Well, I think we need to see the empowerment of the Iranian people. And there are a number of things that the Biden administration can do to increase the ability of the Iranian people to communicate both with each other and with the rest of the world, unhampered by the regime. And so I would say, these fairly low cost, easy fixes to communications would be a quick way to start, to allow them to say, this is what we want. And then I think just simply laying out what are the benefits of cooperation with Israel and the United States in terms of entrepreneurship, economic empowerment, environmental empowerment, healthcare security, all of the things that are what the Iranian people want, we can put into the Cyrus Accords. And I think then it would be up to the Iranian regime to say, we object to this. We don't want our people to have these things, or to have the Iranian people speak out for themselves.
But when you wrote this with Len, and I'm going to ask Len as well, but when you penned this idea in mind, can it happen under this regime, or does regime change need to take place?
I mean, I would say and from what we've seen over the last year, anything can happen. So all of this is possible. And the Iranian people should know this is possible for them, that the hands are outstretched to them. And the regime should know that if what they want, as they say, is economic relief, what they want is engagement with the rest of the world, that option is open to them, as it was for the 4 years of the Trump administration. But what they can't be doing is shooting rockets from the Houthi into Saudi Arabia. They can't be shooting rockets into Erbil. They have to stop this kind of behavior to be embraced and to take these opportunities.
Len, what's your take on that? What would be the ideal situation? What would be the catalyst that would push them into the Cyrus Accords?
Well, the only people who are deaf, dumb, and blind to the possibilities of peace is the Iranian regime. Time after time, they choose to care about the terrorists around the region, finance Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, their proxies in Iraq and everywhere else in the region, instead of the people who live in Iran. And I think the Iranian people know this. It's been 42 years. They've seen this record play over and over and over again. It didn't take very long for the regime to break their promises to the people. The State Department has labeled the regime in Iran as the world's top state sponsor of terrorism for almost 40 years. So they didn't waste any time choosing their priorities, and they didn't choose the Iranian people. They chose terrorism. They chose theft, corruption, incompetence. Frankly, I'm not optimistic that this regime will all of a sudden make a 180 and make the right choice. But the thing that the Cyrus Accords really focuses on is building toward the future. The regime is almost irrelevant, and as Bijan mentioned, it's great to hear that people in Iran have gravitated toward this idea. I'm sure they are the regime's longest suffering victims, and they're ready to for their children to start on the way toward a better future. They see the benefits that are coming to their neighbors from recognizing and cooperating relations with Israel, and that's honestly the Abraham Accords themselves probably came into being as a result of Israel and its Arab neighbors finding common ground around the threat emanating from Iran. And just as Iran has threatened its Jewish and Arab neighbors. It's threatened its own people for 42 years. So the good news is that we can get to work, and just as Jared and the team have put together an economic plan ahead of the political plan for peace in the region, same thing can happen with putting the pieces together toward a better future between the Iranian people and their neighbors. We don't have to ask the regime's permission, or for that matter, the current American administration's position to start building toward that future, because that's really where it's headed.
Nice.
The future, it's the past, and it will be the future, and it's the obvious and natural progression of events. I always say the arc of history bends towards freedom, and so it shall be in Iran. And I can see the day when the people of Iran and the people of Israel sit in hopefully the Rose Garden and sign the Cyrus Accords and begin an era of normal relations between normal neighbors.
Yes.
That's how it's done, and that's how it will be done.
Absolutely. And I love the sound of that. And I have to be devil's advocate for a moment, just because we have to have this conversation. If we were having this conversation when Trump was still in the White House, I would say we're on the 1 yard line to getting what you're talking about, because all the pieces would be in place. We have the Iranian people. We know that they're disenchanted. We know that they're upset for 42 years. We've been hearing their protests. We know that we have a region that's ready to accept this. We know that that Israel's ready, their neighbors are ready, and it's just the timing is right. But under 1 month, it hasn't even been 1 month that the Biden administration has been in office, and already we have had, a 180. You said 180, Glenn. We have had a 180. The same State Department that you stated put Iran's government on the designated terror list. Started giving aid back to the Palestinians. They took the Houthis, that are 100% Iran-backed, off of the terror list. They stopped the sales of the fighter jets to the UAE and Saudis. They stopped supporting Saudi Arabia in the proxy war in Yemen, and the list goes on. So it doesn't, it's no secret where this administration is going. They're taking a page out of the Obama handbook. They're leading towards another deal. But we're not in 2015 anymore. Len, how will this look? How will this look, to the mullahs who understand that their time is great right now? We've got Biden in the White House, and he's going to do their bidding for them. They don't even need to do much. What the timing of all of this?
Well, number one, I hope they're nervous, because as hopeful as they may be in tricking an American administration into a silly deal that has absolutely no benefits to anyone other than the regime. Let's see what happens with the Biden administration, what they actually do. The initial indications are not hopeful. I'm not encouraged by those, as you mentioned. The language, the people that are trying to work this file are not, are not exactly going in the direction of Cyrus Accords. However, I think let's play the long game. The Biden administration is not going to be here forever, nor are the mullahs. And I think the important thing that we can focus on is focus on the future, which means regardless of what the Biden administration does, what choices it makes in the short run, as you said, it's not 2015 anymore. You cannot put that genie back in the bottle. The deal was atrocious in 2015 when President Obama and President Biden now pretended that some sort of magical transformation is going to happen from the world's top state sponsor of terrorism. We know better now. We've had some time. We've seen that the Supreme Leader has once again stated he's not about to negotiate any other deal, that he wants to go back to 2015 JCPOA deal, which If I were Ayatollah Khamenei, I would too, because he could not have dreamed about a better deal. But the world has seen the results of it, and I don't think we're going back. Certainly, some of the sunsets have begun to expire. We've seen in October the first sunset expire, which is the regime's ability to buy and sell conventional weapons. When I say conventional weapons, we're talking about tanks, jets, helicopters. We're talking about plenty dangerous weapons that we're putting back in the hands of the world's biggest sponsor of terrorism, which they will try and ship to their terrorist proxies in Yemen, Lebanon, Gaza, and elsewhere. So I'm hoping that sanity prevails, and people who are running this policy in the Biden administration, when we get past the words and check into reality and see the cooperation that's happening outside of this administration between Israel, the Emirates, Saudis, Bahrain, and all of those countries that have in some ways moved past JCPOA a long time ago, it's not going to be so easy to sell them or anyone else on a fairy tale. So I don't think we can go back to 2015. And frankly, as far as Cyrus Accords is concerned, I don't think it's about the Biden administration or the mullahs today. I think it's about putting the pieces in place so that when the time comes and the regime is on the ash heap of history, that the people of Iran can start their next chapter with their neighbors as quickly as possible and not have to start from scratch.
Right. And I think you said the magic phrase that probably perked up all of our ears, especially Bijan's, when he said the mullahs won't be here forever. I saw Bijan Kian a few months ago, and he said to me, when I asked him, what's going to be he said to me, they're not going to be around forever. And I said, what's your prediction? And he said, ask me in March. You remember, Mr. Kian? And we're not yet at March, but I was hoping a few weeks early you can give us your prognosis of how the mullahs in Tehran are doing.
Well, Len and Victoria have thought a lot about Cyrus Accords, and maybe the reason it has captured the hearts and the minds of many Iranians that I talk to every day. It's because what you're looking at, Lisa, and I know you said devil's advocate, but even the devil himself would not bet on the success of the clerical regime, the terrorist, inept, corrupt, kleptocrat regime in Iran is a 42-year-old juvenile delinquent. You're looking at the people of Iran with 3,000 years of civilization. And which one do you really want to deal with? People of an ancient civilization or a 42-year-old juvenile delinquent? And when you look at history, it's important. As Len said, Cyrus Accords is about future, about visualizing that future, and people of Iran are already doing that. People of Israel are already doing that. I see heart signs held by the youth in Iran and in Israel, sending those messages to each other already. Cyrus Accords is a people-to-people agreement, a new bond that's going to be reviving the history. The history shows that ups and downs have taken place. We talked about 2,559 years ago, but fast forward to about 70 years ago, on March 14th, you talked about March, and there's a reason I said that. Amazing things happened in the month of March. It was March 14, 1950, where Iran, the imperial government of Iran, of course, became the second Muslim country to recognize Israel. And then, of course, fast forward to after World War II, the cooperation peaked to levels where an Iranian diplomat, Abdul Hussein Sardari, was a young diplomat in Paris in 1937 as the terrible events took place and the Holocaust struck. He did not leave his post in Paris to Vichy like the Iranian ambassador. He stayed back. What did he do? He issued, without permission from his government in Tehran, He issued hundreds of passports to non-Iranian Jews. That behavior still remembered in the hearts and minds of Iranians. We have a match in America, 1979. President Carter issued an order probably in a position that had every right to do as an American, was offended by the actions of the revolutionaries taking American diplomats hostage. He ordered the deportation of all the Iranian students. Well, an American diplomat matched Sardari's action. Ambassador Stuart Eisenstadt would tell you the story that he came up with he's a dear friend, he came up with a plan to save many Iranian students from going back and facing terrible fate in Iran. That has continued throughout the years. The people of Iran are looking at a future that can take place. I was talking to a dear friend of mine, Scott Edelman, the other day, and Scott said, Bijan, this is to answer your question about the hurdles, about possibilities. Look where we are today. The Iranian regime, the Islamist Republic in Iran, as I call them, had a plan. Their plan was, look, I'm going to compete with the Arab world on hating Israel. Well, the Abraham Accords took that position out. As Scott was saying to me, they don't have that. They don't have that place anymore because the Arabs are not in that competition anymore, and Iran has lost it. It's out of business. Not Iran, but Islamist Republic in Iran. So no, I don't think this is a far-fetched plan at all. Why? Because people are embracing it. They will take this. They will visualize a future where the youth of Israel and the youth of Iran, brilliant minds, can get together, solve problems in medicine, in health, in agriculture, in education. And there are precedents for all of this to happen already in Iran. And Iran in the old days was the only country that sold oil to Israel when no other oil-rich country in the world was selling oil to Israel. So the relationship is very strong. Mm-hmm. The foundation is there. It will happen, and I believe it's already happening.
Yeah, it's definitely happening among the people, and I think that all of you are absolutely right in pointing to the natural relationship between the people. They're freedom-loving. They want the technology. They want the tourism. They want to travel throughout the Middle East, and these tropes about hating and this propaganda is just heavy on their minds. They don't want to hear it. And I know Bijan always talks about this on our shows and talks about how the young people are not buying into, we hate Israelis and we support the Palestinians. They know that the money that belongs to them is going to Syria and to Hezbollah and to Hamas and to places it shouldn't go. So then the question begs, and Bijan, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Victoria and Len, because if this regime is removed and we have a secular government in Iran, then we don't need an accord because we have a natural alliance. We have a relationship that doesn't need a definition or a phrase or an accord. But if this regime stays in place, can we have this accord?
Lisa, you're very familiar with the situation in Iran. You're watching these things very closely, and you know what has happened. Over the 42 years, what this regime, this Islamist caliphate, as I call it, just like ISIS, just like ISIL, this regime has done to infrastructure, economy, people, livelihood of Iranians, what the worst invaders throughout history could not do to Iran and Iranians. Islamic Republic has actually destroyed what was there in Iran. Look at what they've done to water resources. Why? Not because building dams solves water problems, because there is money. There's money in building dams. And the IRGC, the uniform terrorists in the world, are benefiting from building dams. So look what they've done. Now, if you were looking for the best water technology experts in the world, you'll find them in Israel. The reason is very obvious. They need it very badly, and they have to learn, and they have learned, and they can help. So, I am this is not an optimistic, just because everybody knows how I feel about the Islamist Republic in Iran. Not because of that. It's not my feelings. It's facts and logic. Logic says there is a need. People of Iran are the worst enemies of the Islamist Republic. They know it. Don't listen to them. They're whistling at night just to calm their own nerves by making these statements. And what they did today, as Victoria mentioned, is really trying to give comfort and assurance to the uniformed terrorists called IRGC that, hey, don't worry about it. We're going to be here. Look, we are going to shoot at America's interest, and America is not going to respond at all. Now, who am I to advise the Biden administration? They're very experienced diplomats. I respect them all. They know what they have to do. But I would say this. I would say this as someone who comes from that culture. I believe I understand Iranians better than Secretary Blinken and Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Malley. And I would say to them, if you bet on changing the behavior of this Islamist republic, you would lose. Do not make that bet. Others have made that bet and have lost and will not happen. If you believe the Islamist republic can change, ask yourself again, Islamic Republic, can you change Islam? No, you cannot. That is the philosophy. So instead of betting on the continuation of this tyranny, this terror, this kleptocracy, bet on the peace and prosperity with the people of Iran. You will win. That is a winning bet.
Bijan, what percent of the people, the population, 80 million people in Iran, what percentage of the population would want to see regime change, would you say, approximately?
Well, 70% of the population is under 40 years old, and they have never lived under any other system other than the Islamic Republic in Iran. They've seen the performance. They've seen how the lives, their parents who made the terrible decision, and I'm not shy about that. Yes, the current generation has to ask a hard question from their parents. Why did you do this? They've seen it. They've seen where the Islamic Republic has taken a country that was prosperous. There was, what was their complaint? Why did you come up with a revolution? This is the question today that the youth in Iran are asking their government. Don't underestimate the Iranian people. They're very patient. They look very polite. They don't look like what they can do when they see an enemy. They are fierce. Look, they have survived throughout centuries. They will rise. They will bring this government down. At the end of the day, it is both the right and responsibility of the Iranian people to choose or change their own government. And I will make a bet here. I'm not a rich person, but I'll make a bet with you on what I can afford, that the Iranian people are going to win, And you and I talked about March and Nowruz. We talked about March 14, 1950. We are now approaching the month of March and the arrival of renewal of the bonds of friendship, which is a Nowruz tradition. We are approaching that magical moment where the earth renews itself. And why not? Why not hoping that people of Iran would actually come to you, Len and Victoria, and say, we're ready. We want to work with the Israeli youth. Who's going to stop them? I am going to be polite and say, with all due respect, I don't think the Biden administration is going to be able to stop this. How? How are they going to stop this? Secretary Kerry got up and went to Europe to push the European banks to do business with the Iranian banks. He failed. The reason he failed is because banks don't listen to governments. They listen to their shareholders. And that's how it works. People don't listen to governments. When they see a benefit for themselves, today a mother in Iran is worried about her children not being able to get protein because corruption. There's no problem with having poultry farms, because there is a kleptocracy that just absolutely picks the pocket of Iranian people every day. doesn't let that happen. What is going to stop an Iranian family and an Israeli family to say, by the way, how do you grow turkeys in Israel? Can we do that here? That would solve the problem. It can happen. This is not imagination. It's happening already.
Victoria, let's talk about some of the foreign policy moves that this administration has made so far. As I said, we're not even a month in, but they've made some very what perhaps everyone on this panel would consider damaging changes that may last for 4 years, but may last beyond that. One of which I've been following very closely is the fact that there has been no call yet made to Israel and a reluctance to call Israel our ally. How damaging would you say this is for the region as a whole and to our relationship with our ally in the Middle East?
Obviously, Lisa, it's very concerning. I mean, they're now on day 26, so they're more than 25% through, more than a quarter of the way through their first 100 days, which we heard were going to be transformational, change everything. So far, we've seen very little that's been a dramatic change. We've heard a very dramatic silence towards both Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of our allies in the region. I think that is enormously concerning. I think that should be rectified immediately. I mean, I know Secretary Blinken has spoken to his counterpart, but I do think if President Biden had time to play Mario Kart on Sunday, he might have had time to pick up the phone and call Prime Minister Netanyahu. So, you know, I don't think we're asking for the moon here. One thing I would just sort of riffing off what Bijan was just saying, which I think is very powerful, I would look at another example from the Biden administration, which was from June of 2009, which was the Green Revolution in Tehran, and the decision, which I think was a very deliberate decision on the part of the then Obama administration, not to engage with the protesters who came out after that presidential election to protest the fraudulence of the election. And they had signs calling for President Obama just to speak out in support of them, not to bomb anybody, not to get involved in a dramatic, kinetic sense, but just to express support the way President Reagan would express support for dissidents in the Soviet Union. The decision was not to do that. I think they already thought they had the nuclear deal in their sights. I would just hope that the Biden administration would learn from that example, that was such an extraordinary opportunity to simply speak out for freedom, as Len says, to just speak out for how the arc of history should be curving. And instead of being silent on the part of the United States, for us to be as engaged as possible and as supportive of the Iranian people as possible, because they have elections coming up this June again. This is the end of President Rouhani's term. The Supreme Leader will choose the candidates who will be running in that election. I can imagine it's probably going to be another fraudulent election. If the Iranian people choose this moment to speak out for their own freedoms, I would very much hope the Biden administration would be there to support them. Having seen what we saw in 2009, it could be a huge opportunity. So anything we or they can do now to support any efforts that may be happening in June, I think that would be work that would be very much worth doing.
Yeah, what's crazy to me is that we're living in a day and age where the people who are speaking out for human rights in Iran are on the right. Now, who's speaking out about the gays in Iran? The conservatives are. Who's speaking out about the women on the front lines in Iran? The conservatives are. Who's speaking out about, children getting thrown into prison for a Facebook post? The conservatives are. The champions of human rights. Len, this is all interesting when you take yourself out and you have an aerial view of what's going on to the United States with all these different foreign policy moves. From the north, the Canadians are mad about the Keystone Pipeline, and we have Israel, our main ally in the Middle East, waiting for a phone call, and you have the Saudis, the UAE, very powerful, very modern, allies. Saudis have their own issues, and we can deal with them in a different way, but that doesn't take away our aligned interests What does this do to us on the world stage?
I think the world expects America to lead. It always has, because America's good at it. As a guy who's spent some time in advertising and marketing, I proudly served during the last administration, trying to promote the #1 brand in the world. And the reason it's the #1 brand in the world, without even trying very hard, is because of the founding principles of the United States, which you don't have to look far. Just in the first couple of lines there in Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Who doesn't want that? Everybody wants that. These are universal things. We also recognize that rights don't come from men. Rights come from God and are unalienable. And respect for humanity is something embedded in American history and the way this nation was created. And so people around the world are looking at the United States as that shining city on the hill. And they believe that the values that we live by here can reach them in some way. Why should someone in Tehran or Isfahan or anywhere else wonder, do I need permission from Ayatollah Khamenei to dance on the social media channel? Do I need permission to wear or not wear a hijab? Do I need permission to go to a soccer match? No, I mean, these are things that we in America and anybody who lives in a free country takes for granted. But it is something that America stands for inherently. Freedom is the American brand, and that's why people have always looked at America to lead in that realm. And so I expect that's not going to change. I think you can't change that over 1 year, 2 years, 4 years. It is something that's embedded in the American, in the American way of life. And so when people look at examples of how they want to live, I mean, you just look at, I guess there was a story just a couple of days ago that the Iranian judoka Saeed Maffei, I guess is his name, who could not wrestle, or could not perform for his own country because he was not allowed to compete with an Israeli, counterpart, and so he had to leave his country to compete. And you're looking at more and more of Iranian young people. A chess champion can't perform, can't compete on behalf of her own nation, so she has to leave. Why are Iranians doing so much better everywhere else in the world? Why should they not be doing this in their own country? I think more and more people are looking at that, and they're asking, why are Iran's best and brightest feel like they cannot fulfill their destiny and reach their potential in their own country, the country of their own ancestors? It's very sad, and I think as the Iranian people are looking at the progress that's being made as a result of Abraham Accords, where an Israeli anthem is played in the United Arab Emirates, where Israelis and Arab people can coexist and live normal lives, and they're looking at that and they're wondering, why not us? And there's an obvious answer, of course, is because the regime that is currently in Tehran doesn't represent them, and the regime is afraid of its own people. It has no legitimacy among Iranian citizens, and it's afraid that its next election, should they allow it to be free, will be the last election where they'll be in power. And I think, as Victoria mentioned, what I'd like to see as the next, rigged election it comes around in Iran, that Iranian diaspora, all freedom-loving people, demand of governments in their countries that they watch those elections very carefully and listen to the people. Don't listen to the mouthpiece of the regime, Zarif. Don't listen to the apologists for the regime around the world. Listen to the people. And if you actually if you're honest with yourself, and if you do listen to the people, all of those fake arguments fall to the wayside, because it's obvious that the people want to be free. The people are looking and they want nothing more than what any other human being anywhere else in the world wants. And they're sick and tired of their wealth, their prestige, their culture being trampled on by the people who are supposed to be looking out for their welfare. There's no reason whatsoever, if the world listens to the people of Iran, that day when the Iranian people can rejoin the community of peaceful nations, starting with their own neighbors in Israel and the Arab world, that will happen. And that, I think, needs to be demanded by folks like us who know how the media works, right, who know what governments respond to, and to hold them accountable. To hold them accountable to truly stand by their values, and defend the principles that we all pay great lip service to, but it only matters when push comes to shove. And in 2009, we dropped the ball. Bad on us. In 2021, when that election comes around and the Iranian people demand legitimacy and representation by their leaders, the world better not drop the ball.
Yeah, perfectly said. I think it's quite challenging to, argue with the narrative when CNN gives a platform to Javad Zarif just last weekend to come there to blame the United States for the sanctions, to blame all of the country's miseries on the United States, and again, being a huge mainstream media outlet. Doing that, and that's why programs like this are so incredibly important, obviously, to set the narrative straight about what the people of Iran want, what they're thinking, and what would be best for their future. Bijan, I know you have such a tight watch on the people of Iran, and not just Tehran. I think what happened in 2009 is that we saw some really attractive, design-toting Iranians, and people kind of, labeled that as, okay, that's Tehran. It's like saying that's Manhattan, but where are the rest of the Iranians? Where are the rural ones? What do they want? And I know that you have a very close watch on that. Second thing, and I want you to speak to, what the people of Iran want and how we can empower them. And the second thing I want you to speak to, Bijan, is, both Victoria and Len mentioned 2009. And of course, as Iranians, we look at 2009 and we also think it was a very lost opportunity. But as somebody who's been covering this, I actually think perhaps that would have been squashed regardless, but that since then, the opposition in Iran has gained momentum. They have matured. They understand their government better than ever, and they call out their government without any fear. I think they've gotten to a place where now they cannot be stopped. And for that reason, perhaps it was, whatever you want to say, meant to be, or they had a growth spurt from 2009 till now. Bijan, can you speak to that a bit more?
Of course. Lisa, I think we need to adjust our lenses, look at the Iranian people differently. As the Middle East has changed, as the Abraham Accords has changed the relationships and the balance of power and the perspective for peace in the Middle East, we have to remember the Iranian people have also evolved today. Even in the ranks of IRGC, in the ranks of the military, of the security apparatus, there is so much inequality. There is so much injustice that they are very, very unhappy. You ask, what do people want? I give you a real live example. When this news, when the article that Victoria and Len authored, and the news got to the Iranian people, a number of people, including myself and my friends, you mentioned the Institute for Voices of Liberty, individuals who all care about what is taking place in the world. They're all watching and they're all excited. Everybody's talking about Victoria Coates and Len Khodorkovsky. You think the people of Iran are not paying attention. I have to tell you a real story. When we talked about Victoria, somebody from Iran sent to me a note, says, Victoria Coates. Isn't she the lady that wrote the first policy on Iran, and it was on the webpage of the White House? And I said, yes, that is Victoria Coates. They know you, Victoria. People of Iran know you. They've been watching what you've been doing. Len Khodorkovsky has been talking to the Iranian people directly, as an expert in communications. He knows how to talk to. After so many years, we had individuals like Victoria and Len and their colleagues, I'm sure, very capable people in the State Department, other places in U.S. government, that understood the Iranian people. Things have changed. What do they expect? I can tell you, Lisa, they're already receiving what they expect from Victoria, from Len, and I'm not so pessimistic on the Biden administration. President Biden is an experienced politician. He knows how to bet, he knows how to win, and he wants to win. President Biden, you want to win? Win with the people of Iran. It's the best bet. You will win safely. Stay on their side. Don't disappoint them like President Obama did. In 2009, I was working for President Obama, and I was outside the country doing my work. And but I was communicating with my friends back in the States, and this is when the young girl Neda went to the streets to just see what was going on. She was just a citizen, concerned. She wasn't a freedom fighter or anything like that. She wasn't carrying weapons. She was unarmed. She was just walking. They shot her in the heart. Do you believe that, Victoria, you were at the Broadcasting Board of Governors recently? Voice of America refused to broadcast that scene of Neda on the floor, bleeding to death. And when they were asked the question, the editor at the time said, "Oh, it's not verified. How do we know it's not doctored up?" That was the reflection of what we have done. That was the United States. History, whether fair or not, history is going to say, President Obama, you didn't answer the call for freedom. You did not answer the Iranian people's cry for help. They said, are you with us? Or are you with them? President Obama didn't say anything. That was the answer. I'm not with you. That's for sure. So today things have changed. They look at America. They're hopeful. There are many Iranians who are hopeful. I don't want to join this hostility against the Biden administration. They're in place. They're going to be there. I wrote a note to President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. I said, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, I did not vote for you. I don't agree with a lot of your declared policies, including return to JCPOA, which is a ridiculous press release, one-sided. But you are my president. You are my vice president. Please don't forget the people of Iran. That's the voice that the Institute for Voices of Liberty is there to promote, to advocate, to reflect, to echo. And I want to thank any officer in the United States government, in the current administration, who is listening, to say thank you for staying on the side of the people of Iran. And to Mr. Malley, I would say, Mr. Malley, your ideas have not been so hot. I don't agree with your ideas, but I'm hopeful you'll see the light. Please don't believe the nonsense of what I call His Excellency Pinocchio, the foreign minister of Iran. Believe the Iranian people. Listen to them. Listen to them. Thanks to the work that Len and Victoria and others have done. They're on social media. They're talking to you. Listen to them. That's all you have to do. Listen to them and don't turn them down. Don't disappoint them this time. As Victoria said, we are just looking at another election. You know what Rouhani is an intelligence officer, first of all. Everybody should know that. He's a military man. He's an intelligence officer. He's trained to lie. So what he said the other day was, oh, you're all asking for a referendum. Well, if people go to the polls and 70% of the population votes for this regime, that is your referendum. That is what you get. Now, please, people of Iran know this, and we must recognize this shenanigan, this charade played by the supreme leader and the so-called elected president. None of that. None of that. Read the constitution of the Islamist Republic in Iran. It will tell you very clearly, one man, unelected official, supreme leader, and his family are stealing Iranians' natural resources, taking away Iranians' rights, and this cannot continue. To the Iranian people, I say, please understand, if you go and vote in this election, you are giving credibility to people who've done that to you. So they know it. I don't have to tell them. They're smart. They're telling me. They're saying, continue the pressure and free us from the reign of terror of the Islamist Republic.
Yeah,
Well, if I could just jump in.
Please do.
On that point that you just made, Bijan, on keeping the pressure. We just saw an incredible letter co-signed by 38 courageous Iranians in Iran that put their freedom and perhaps even their lives at risk by writing an open letter to President Biden, asking them, among other things, to keep maximum pressure regime. We saw a couple of people, a couple of those co-signers speak about it in recent days, and they reiterated essentially that the policies of the Trump administration, the maximum pressure policies that targeted the regime, that called a spade, that did not mince words in defining their oppressors, that was the correct path as far as they're concerned. And they're asking President Biden to continue down that path because they recognize that the regime only changes behavior when they're pressured, when they're backed into the corner. And given any relief, they will feel emboldened and double down on the bad behavior that's been their trademark for 42 years. So I say, don't listen to Len Khodorkovsky or Bijan or Victoria. Listen to the people of Iran who signed that letter, who are telling you what the people in Iran think. You want to play political games and try and discredit the past administration versus the current administration. That's fine. We know how that works, but I think we all have to be honest with ourselves. And if you're going to say, as the administration, that number one, we're going to open the doors to multiple voices on this policy, and we're going to listen not just to the echo chamber, but to outside credible voices. What other more credible voices can there be than the people in Iran putting their lives on the line, asking the administration to do something?
Right.
That is something worth listening to.
Right.
And finally, I would just say, look, I think to bring it back to Cyrus Accords, we're not going to solve all of these problems overnight. The goal is to start building toward a future that's inevitable. And I invite business leaders, thinkers, artists, entertainers, politicians, anyone who's ever given thought how to make a society better, to start thinking how Iran could be better after the plague that's been upon them for 4 decades is long gone. I think the time to start thinking about those things right now, and the future of Iran is with Cyrus Accords, not with IRGC or JCPOA or any other acronym. And that's what I would ask everyone in this audience to focus on and not get bogged down in the daily drama around, he said, she said, or
Right.
political nuances.
Right. And Victoria, I want to just end with you. We're out of time, unfortunately. But you are also wonderful, and you give such reverberation to the voices of the people in Iran and what they want. So in drafting the Cyrus Accords and advocating for it, you are truly doing the work of telling their story and really correcting the narrative that is being pushed, whether it's by the regime or here by the mainstream media. Victoria, what are your plans together with Len to push this forward? What are the next steps in getting it recognized by more people, by taking it to Washington, etc.?
Well, certainly, I think, as I said at the beginning, and just Lisa, thank you for hosting us tonight. Bijan, Len, a joy to be with you as always, working on these weighty matters. I would say the other thing we want to pay some attention to is what the American people think. And we have a Congress that is as tightly divided as it ever has been. And Iran is a very strong political issue in the Congress. And I think taking the Cyrus Accords to the Congress and seeing if we can get bipartisan support for an approach that will be between the Israeli people, the Iranian people, and the American people, working together toward a more hopeful future, even with this Congress, I think we could get some very interesting, some broad support for this issue. So I think what Len and I will be trying to do, working with Bijan as well, is seeing how we start building out this concept into a very practical proposal, seeing what kind of support we might have in Capitol Hill, in the Knesset, in Israel after their election, and then in the lead up to the Iranian election. So I think we have a great deal of potential going forward. Really appreciate this opportunity to start to lay out some of our ideas, and hopefully we'll be able to have another conversation soon about next steps.
Great.
Lisa, I just want to jump in and say that if the JCPOA was to be taken to the Senate as a treaty to be ratified, and if it was in the hands of Democrats like Senator Schumer or Senator Menendez, the JCPOA press release wouldn't have been there. That ridiculous deal wouldn't have been put together. And I believe in what Victoria just said. There is a lot to say about leadership in Congress with a lot of respect and a belief that they would do the right thing. I believe in what Victoria just said and what Len said also. Don't listen to me. Who am I to talk about what is right for America or what is right for the Iranian people?
Right.
Listen to the Iranian people. Right. Their voice will speak the last word.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what this accord does is what we've been saying for years. It takes the conversation off of nuclear weapons and war and brings it back to human rights and the people. And that's exactly what we've been advocating for.
And prosperity.
And prosperity in the future. And I thank you all. We're out of time, but I will be back with Victoria one-on-one on the Foreign Desk podcast on Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We will talk about all things foreign policy, and I will finally hear about how she got her PhD in art history, which I've been dying to hear, and how she got into foreign policy, and all of her opinions on what's going on. She's a real powerhouse and a good friend. And I thank you, Victoria, for being here. Thank you, Len. Thank you, Bijan. Thank you all for a wonderful program.
Great to be with you.
Have a wonderful evening, and see you all next time.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Good night.
Great to be with you.